The uncomfortable atmosphere continued even after those two left. It was thick with the idea that thinking about who the killer was would be the same as deciding who to doubt. It had begun to feel like discussion of the incident was itself taboo. So no one was mentioning it, at least out loud. However, those thoughts were what filled our minds. All that we couldn't say out loud made our heads feel like they were going to explode. So, at least on the outside, the parlor had once again regained its calm mood. Though, everything was left unsettled.
少しだけ雨足が弱まった気がするね。
まだいっぱい降ってるよ。おー。
仮に止んだって、この島には船がねえんだしな。船が明日すぐに来てくれりゃいいんだがよ。洋館バカンさんもうお腹いっぱいだぜ。
母さん、明日船はいつ来るのかな。
本来なら帰りの船は今日の3時に来てくれることになっていました。先方も台風が過ぎてから出直すと電話をしてくれたでしょうが、あいにく電話は普通ですから。でも向こうも子供の使いではありません。客人の方々の送迎目的だと教えてありますから、おそらく明日の朝一番で多分9時頃に来てくれるでしょう。
It was completely black outside. When I looked at the clock, I realized that it was just past 7. I was starting to get hungry. In the kitchen, Kumasawa was cooking enthusiastically. She had laid out a variety of dishes, and while they didn't match the level of Goda's artful cooking, they were still quite gorgeous. It was an act of kindness from Kumasawa, trying to use food to enliven everyone's low spirits. Kumasawa wasn't nearly as talented as a professional cook like Goda, but she was far from unskilled. On the contrary, since she had been brought up in a fishing village, the simple food she created was sometimes very highly valued. Kanon arranged the food Kumasawa had finished creating on plates, under her direction. Kanon also helped in the kitchen sometimes, but since he was rarely placed in that role, he was slightly awkward, even though he tried his best. Self-conscious about the fact that he couldn't skillfully arrange the food, Kanon's expression darkened slightly. But Kumasawa smiled to say everything was fine.
きれいに盛り付けられてますよ。カノン君もお上手ですよ。
シャノン姉さんだったらもっときれいに。
Kanon stopped arranging the food for a bit, and hung his head. Orchid. Shannon was the one who always assisted Kumasawa in our cooking. Tonight, Kanon was doing it instead. As he remembered Shannon's face, and her brutal end, he grimaced. In the darkness. Wait, why is Nanjo in the kitchen? Genji spoke kindly to Kanon as he advanced upon. Are they playing chess in the kitchen? Nanjo had escaped from the parlor once the mood had become sour, and Genji had become his opponent in a game of chess upon Nanjo's request.
はい。今は忘れます。
それがいいだろう。
Genji purposely faced away from Kanon as he spoke. He did so because he understood that it might make things tougher on Kanon if he noticed that someone was looking at his eyes. Nanjo also understood that, and held back any thoughtless words.
金蔵さんもどこへ行かれたんでしょうな。ご無事だといいのですが。わかりません。ただ、すべては親方様が望まれ、仕組まれたことのように思っています。
Okay, so if Kinzo's the culprit, Genji's definitely involved, and Nanjo's not.
それを邪推することは、親方様にお仕えする家具には過ぎたことです。源氏さんは怖くないのですか？私には今夜まだ何か良くないことが起こるような気がして怖いのです。怖いことなど何も。私はただ後宮家にお仕えするだけですので。
Nanjo sighed through his nose and made a carefully considered move. Nanjo was very slightly dubious. Could Genji possibly think that he would be left out of this? He couldn't begin to imagine what was happening inside this mansion. But he definitely couldn't deny the possibility that it was something of Kinzo's design. If you liken this island to chest, Kinzo had opened the game, and as a result, 6 pieces had fallen. Could it be that Genji was calm because he believed that he alone was outside the chessboard and safe? Nanjo thought about it. Wasn't everyone just a piece on this chessboard? Lined up equally, without any exceptions? Hold on. How many pieces are on a chessboard? Hold up. How many pieces are on each side? 1, 2, 3, 8. Okay, so it's 16 on both sides. Wait, okay. Castle, castle, knight, knight, bishop, bishop, queen, king. Okay, yeah. It's 16 pieces on each side, so it's not 18. For some reason I thought it was 18 real quick, for which that would make a lot of sense, but there's only 16 pieces each side. Though the 16... No, wait. The 16 could represent the 16 people who are not involved with the plan, while the 2 others are on the other side, controlling everything from the other side on the chessboard. So, the 16 are the 14 people not, who are not the culprits. And the 2 people on the other side are the culprits. That's where it's going with the chessboard analogy. 2 people are culprits most likely. And the other 16 are on the other side of the chessboard. Wasn't even Genji, who had gained more of Kinzo's trust than anyone. No. Wasn't Nanjo himself, also, although proud of his position as Kinzo's only close friend. Just another piece? I'm gonna reread that, I'm sorry. Wasn't even Genji, who had gained more of Kinzo's trust than anyone. No. Wasn't Nanjo himself, although proud of his position as Kinzo's only close friend. Just another one of the pieces laid out on the chessboard?
Genji-san, 私は今夜が本当に怖いのです。無事に明日の朝を迎えられることを心より願っています。
The guest room that Eva and Hideyoshi had moved into was used to house guests before the guest house had been constructed. So, until a very few years ago, they had stayed in this room every family conference and were very familiar with it. This room, just like a room at a hotel, had a bedroom and a bathroom. So, even though they were still shut in, it was far more comfortable than the parlor.
やっぱり家族だけだとリラックスできるな。他のみんなも客室にこもって鍵をかけてりゃええんや。
夏日姉さんが客間を出るなって威張り散らしてるんだもん。誰も口答えなんてできないでしょ。あの人ずーっと冷や飯を食ってきたから兄さんが死んでやっと天下が来たって張り切ってんのよ。まったくずうずうしいったら嵐の。
まあそう言うな。夏日さんもあれで結構頑張っとるんやで。お前もそう突っかからんでもええやないか。さっきのレシートの件もあそこまでは言い過ぎやで。
だってあそこで言わなかったらもう言うタイミングがないんだもん。
Eva, sulking cutely, sat down beside Hideyoshi, who was lying on the bed watching TV. Hope.
でも、こうして二人きりになるのはずいぶん久しぶりよね。
そうやな。思えばわしもお前も老けたもんや。ジョージが生まれてから何もかもがあっという間や。
This is raising so many death flags for at least one of them.
本当にあっという間よ。
So many death flags are being raised right now.
子供を作るの焦りすぎたかしら。
Ava's eyes looked like they were staring off into the distance. Yes, she had thought it a once-in-a-lifetime chance. Her older brother Klaus had been unable to have a child for quite some time. 6 years passed after his 6 years passed after his marriage to Nasuhi without any signs of pregnancy, which didn't please Kinzo at all. As for Eva herself, she would be removed from the Ushiromiya register anyway once she got married. So whether a successor to the head was born or not, it was all the same to her. So she had thought. But then, one day, she had a heavenly revelation. Or maybe it was the whisperings of the devil that she had heard in her greed. Perhaps she could remain in the Ushiromiya family register if she gave birth to a successor first. If things went well, then maybe she could even inherit the Ushiromiya family herself. When she proposed this to Hideyoshi, he approved of it instantly. This had not been because Hideyoshi also had greedy thoughts. For Hideyoshi, who had no close relatives, it was a chance for him to feel once more that long-forgotten thing called family. So he agreed, without hesitation, not to fuss over which family name they were to keep upon getting married, and assented to having his name entered into the Ushiromiya family register. It wasn't easy to persuade Kinzo, but as his daughter, Eva knew Kinzo's personality well. So, she chose the time when Kinzo was most dissatisfied with Nasuhi, and expertly managed to make him accept Hideyoshi as a son-in-law. Looking at Hideyoshi, who had achieved success after starting from nothing, Kinzo might have seen a little bit of himself. He quickly grew to like Hideyoshi, and permitted him to transfer into the Ushiromiya register. George would eventually become the successor to the Ushiromiya family. They had raised him strictly with that purpose in mind. George had been worth their while, and had grown into a fabulous young man who wouldn't disappoint no matter where he went. That was why she couldn't stand that he was in love with a servant like Shannon. So, when she had learned that Shannon had died and the engagement had been invalidated, well, part of her had been shocked at the gruesome scene. Oh my god. God, fucking Eva. God damn it. Eva! Eva! What the fuck? What the fuck, Eva? Well, part of her had been shocked at the gruesome crime. Another part of her had been relieved that her precious George wouldn't be stolen by some servant girl.
私、クラウス兄さんのことが昔から嫌いだったわ。偉そうで威張ってて、自分がやがては当主になるのだと自慢してて、だからそれに一矢報いてやりたかった。でもそれは子供の頃の感情なのよ。でもその感情は結局自分の人生のほとんどを支配した。それだけならまだいい。その感情はあなたやジョージまで巻き込んで振り回してしまった。
エヴァ、備え自分を責めるな。
Hideyoshi sat up and put his arm around Eva. She could feel a warm understanding from him.
わしはな、自分の人生はもうとっくに折り返しに入っとる。でもな、今日までの生活を後悔したことは一度もないで。一度もや。エヴァと一緒で他の男どもじゃ味わえん楽しい人生になったと思っとる。戦争で身寄りを失ったわしにもう一度家族のぬくもりを教えてくれた。だから後ろ宮の家には感謝しとるし、わしの唯一の家だと思っとる。わしとお前が歩んできた人生にな、無駄なことなんかなんもなかった。今日までほんまに楽しい人生やったね。
ありがとう、あなた。
Eva hung her head, burying her face in Hideyoshi's chest. Probably no one in the parlor could even imagine that this side of Eva existed.
感謝するのはわしや。
I'm already calling it. If someone's gonna die in this chapter, it's gonna be fucking Hideyoshi.
今日までお前と一緒にいて後悔した日なんてあらへん。
私もよ。あなたと一緒になれてよかった。
ジョージももう立派な大人や。わしが見張ってなくてもしっかり仕事ができる一人前や。で、正月あたりをのんびりモルジブあたりで過ごさんか。わしら二人水いらずや。
嫌よ。毎年年賀状の返礼で寝る暇もないとか言ってるじゃない。
次の正月だけはなしや。年賀状は見ん。黙って下のお年玉くじだけチェックするんや。今年はカラーテレビくらい当てたいで。
やだ。モルジブでお年玉くじのチェックなんてしたくない。
じゃあそいつもなしや。水いらずのんびりでジョージが生まれる直前の新婚時代の続きをちょいとしてみんか。
それならいいわね。
モルジブはええとこらしいで。なんもない島に美しいサンゴ礁と水上コテージが並んでてな。
新婚時代の続きっていつからなの？
仕事納めしたらすぐや。レコー店に聞いてみんとわからんが、多分大晦日前には。
いや、今すぐがいい。
Peevishly, or maybe coquettishly, Eva applied for his lips. The only sounds that filled the room were the distant voice of the announcer on the news, which Hideyoshi had left on, and the obnoxious pounding of the rain against the window. Now into the hallway. There was a knock on the door, and Genji-san entered.
奥様、お夕食の準備が整いました。お食事はまたこちらでよろしいですか？
ええ、ここへ運ばせなさい。南條先生はまだ厨房にいるのですか？
はい。次の一手を熟考したいとおっしゃっております。ご安心を。他の使用人たちとご一緒です。
源氏さんはじいさまの相手ができるくらいチェスが強いもんな。南條先生よりも強いらしいぜ。
そうなんだ。昔相手をしてもらったことがあるけど、あれは勝たせてくれたのかな。
マリア、もうすぐ飯だそうだぜ。しかしよく一日中テレビを見ていて飽きねえな。
うん、いつもテレビいっぱい見てるから平気。
マリアちゃんはテレビっ子なんだね。
食事だから机の上を片付けないとダメだぜ。
It was still cluttered with the aftermath of the drawing contest we had all been having, using several pages torn out of Maria's notebook. Jessica began cleaning that up quickly. Still, everyone here sure can draw. Really shocking.
源氏、エヴァさんたちにもせめて食事くらい一緒にしないかとお声をかけなさい。どうせ断るでしょうが。
かしこまりました。
お父様の次はエヴァさんですか。つくづく後宮家の食卓には全員が揃いませんね。
Well, not just Kenzo and Eva. How about Klaus, Kyrie, and Rudolph? I'm sorry. Wait, who else was in there? Goda, Shannon. I'm missing someone. Who else was in there? Hold up. Who else died? I forgot all the people who died. Hold up. Okay. Oh, Rosa! How did I forget Rosa? I'm sorry, everyone. I forgot Rosa. Nasuhi felt her headaches start throbbing again, and lightly held her temples. The distance from the kitchen to the parlor wasn't that large, so Genji had gone there and back by himself. But the guest room was a little farther away. Nasuhi had warned him not to be alone without good reason. And just now, Nanjo had also admonished him, saying that it would be better if he held a little more concern for his safety. Genji took Kanon with him, and the two of them went to visit Eva and Hideyoshi in their guest room. Genji knocked on the door.
エヴァ様、秀吉様、お夕食の準備が整いました。
He waited a short while for them to come out, but there was no response.
源氏様、これは。
Oh my god, they're dead. Oh my, are you serious? Kanon put, okay, I'm not surprised, but I didn't expect them to die this early. Kanon put it under the door. A Western-style envelope had been inserted under it. Normally, when something was inserted this way, it would be interpreted as a message from someone outside to someone in the room. So, since this might be a private note meant for Eva and Hideyoshi, it was not something that Kanon and Genji were supposed to take interest in. But this Western-style envelope was Kenzo's envelope, the same as the one Maria had taken out last night and surprised everyone with. The Witch of the Painting.
間違いない。親方様の封筒。
あるいは。
Although it had been Kenzo's envelope, the author of the letter Maria had read aloud last night had not been Kenzo. Genji continued knocking a little harder and called out in a loud voice.
エヴァ様、エヴァ様、源氏でございます。いらっしゃいますか。お返事をお願いいたします。エヴァ様。
Now, I was suspecting only Hideyoshi to die, but I'm gonna say this now. I bet Ava's also dead. But there was no response from inside. Sometimes, when the servants went to call some guests for a meal, the guests would be sleeping so deeply that they wouldn't wake up. In times like that, the servants would stick a letter in the door to show that they had called by, and then leave the guests be. However, despite that, Genji beat even harder on the door and called out Ava's name. But there was no answer. Kanon stuck his ear up to the door, and holding his breath, listened for any sounds coming from inside.
テレビの音らしきものが。でも気配が感じられません。お部屋は空っぽかも。
Genji took out a handkerchief and, careful not to touch it with his bare hands, gently pulled out the envelope which had been stuck under the door. It had been sealed with deep red sealing wax. Without a doubt, the mark on that sealing wax had come from the Ushiromiya family head's ring.
エヴァ様、エヴァ様、どうかお返事を。もうお部屋にはいらっしゃいませんか。
Even so, there was still no answer. There was a chance that the two were aimlessly walking around the mansion. This was the home Eva had grown up in. There was plenty of reason to think that she had gone out on a casual stroll. Genji groped around in his pocket and pulled out a bundle of keys, including the one that would open the guest room.
ケンジ様
Kanon also understood what this meant. They would sometimes unlock a guest door so they could go in and do things like make the beds, but only after they had made sure the guest was out. To unlock the door for a separate reason, and especially to do so when there was a chance the guests were still in there and without their permission, was an action unbecoming of a servant. However, Genji had decided, if the only problem had been that his knock hadn't received a reply, he wouldn't have gone this far. But the envelope under the door was doubtlessly Kinzo's. Or rather, one of the Western-style envelopes of the Ushiromiya family had. And after last night, the sender of this envelope could be someone other than Kinzo. If this letter had been sent by someone other than Kinzo...
エヴァ様、申し訳ございません。お部屋を失礼させていただきます。
After giving that final notice, Genji stuck one of the keys from the bundle into the keyhole. There was the sound of the door unlocking. And then, he slowly turned the knob and slowly started opening the door. Lights seeped through the crack of the door. Were they in the room? Or had they forgotten to turn out the lights? Clink. It was the sound of the door chain being pulled tight. The chain had been secured. The chain couldn't be secured from the outside. That meant they were in the room now. The sound of voices on the TV seeped out of the room. The lights, the chain, and the TV. All of these things made it clear that they were in the room. But there was no sign of them. Genji called to Eva once again through the crack of the door. But there was no answer.
ケンジ様いかがしますか
As part of their job, the servants were able to unlock almost any lock in the mansion. But they had no way to open a door with a chain. The only way to get by the chain was to cut it. That was certainly not permitted as part of a servant's usual work. A creepy chill was already rushing up their backs. Kanon held his breath again and tried to sense someone through the door, but even so, he was not able to sense anyone.
私は奥様をお呼びしてくる。カノンのチェーンの切断を。
As Kanon rushed away hurriedly to get a cutting tool, he was called back by Genji.
待てカノン。厨房に戻り、熊沢と行動するように。断じて一人で行動してはならんぞ。
はい。かしこまりました。
It looked like Kanon was wondering why he had to do something so troublesome in the middle of this urgent situation. But Genji had said it out of wariness. He didn't care what happened to himself. But in the worst case scenario, he didn't want anything to happen to Kanon. Scar in the score. In the kitchen was Kumasawa, who was piling food on the servant cart, and Nanjo, who seemed to have thought of a move that would turn the tables on Genji, and had been awaiting his return, wanting to show him. But he immediately realized that something was wrong with Genji's demeanor.
おや、どうしましたか、源氏さん。
南條先生、申し訳ありませんが、この勝負は一度中断させてください。カノンはチェーンを頼む。熊沢、食事の配膳は一時中断し、カノンと同行するように。私は奥様のところへ行く。南條先生もご一緒に。
何かあったんですかな。
Genji took Nanjo, who still didn't know what was going on, and quickly left the kitchen.
黒沢さん、申し訳ありませんが、僕と一緒に来てください。
何があったんですか、カノンさん。
Unable to take in the situation, Kumasawa said almost exactly the same thing as Nanjo, and chased after Kanon, who had flown out into the hallway. Accompanied by Kumasawa, Kanon went to the storehouse, and from amongst the tools packed in tool boxes and hanging on the walls, he looked for a tool that could be used to cut the chain.
何を探してるんですか。私も手伝いますよ。
ドアチェーンを切断するんです。大きめの番線カッターはどこだっけ。
ドアチェーンをどうしてそんなことをするんですか。
エヴァ様たちのお部屋にチェーンが中にいらっしゃるはずなのに、お声をかけても返事がないんです。
It took Kumasawa some time to figure out how cutting the chain and Eva and Hideyoshi not answering were connected, but she did realize that this was an urgent situation.
これなら多分。
Kanon took down a very large bolt cutter that had been hanging on the wall. It was called a cutter, but maybe it would be easier to understand if described as having the shape of a large pair of pliers. He recalled being warned that it was a dangerous tool that could easily cut through one of your fingers. Kanon took that and rushed up the stairs. He knew it instinctively. He should fight for every minute, every second to open it quickly. Or maybe, already.
待ってください、カノンさん。
早く。
Kumasawa eventually caught up with him, gasping for breath with both hands on her knees. When Kanon changed his grip on the bolt cutter and looked up at the door, he let out a "ah!" struck speechless. Oh, what's that?
何ですかこれは。
Hell's Halls. Kumasawa screamed weakly, her face pallid. That was no surprise, because right there, on the door, just like the magic circle that had been drawn on the shutter of the Rose Garden storehouse, there was another eerie shape drawn with paint that looked like blood. However, it was dubious whether this one could be called a magic circle, because unlike what most people would think of as a magic circle, it wasn't a circle with shapes drawn inside it, but a slightly more geometrical shape. However, the strange non-alphabetical characters written in the gaps of the figure were, without doubt, the same as the magic circle on the shutter. But the thing that had Kanon struck speechless was not how eerie the magic circle was. Only moments ago, this hadn't been there. He had returned to the kitchen for a short while. He had then gone to the storehouse to grab a tool, and headed right back. Put those together, and it couldn't have been more than 5 minutes. How could someone add something this creepy during that period of time? And as though it had just been drawn, almost like the door itself was bleeding, several unsettling vertical red lines slowly dripped down, getting longer and longer. Kumasawa's knees gave way, and she sank down on the spot. If Kumasawa had done this first, then Kanon surely would have wanted to.
ベアトリーチェ様。
ベアトリーチェ様の仕業ですよ。恐ろしや恐ろしや。
Before I continue on, I need to use the restroom real quick. I'll be back in a second. Kanon gulped, then readied the bolt cutter and approached the door. He didn't want to get close to this disturbing magic circle, and he really didn't want to touch the steadily dripping substance that looked like blood. But if he didn't get close, he couldn't cut the chain. Fighting this cold feeling, he gulped again, and after gathering his courage, went even closer, putting the bolt cutter up against the chain. He then pressed with all of his strength, and cut through the chain far more easily than he had imagined. The cut chain fell into 2 separate parts, which continued to cling as they swayed back and forth.
カノンさん、足元に封筒が。しかもこれは親方様のもの。
It looked like Kumasawa had also noticed the Western-style envelope at the bottom of the door, and that the sealing wax had been sealed with the head's ring. Kanon was lost for just a second over whether he should open the letter first or check inside the room. But he decided on prioritizing his original purpose. Kanon pulled a handkerchief out of his pocket. This was so he wouldn't leave fingerprints on the door. If his worst fears had been realized, the police would want to investigate this room too. He slowly pushed the door open. He was able to hear the sound of the television that had been seeping out slightly more clearly now.
エヴァ様。
Eva was face up on the bed. On the bed? With her shoes still on? Kumasawa, who had fearfully entered after Kanon, and who was hiding behind his back, screamed a short "Hee!" again when she saw Eva like that. Eva's shoes had been the first part of her that Kanon had seen, so the incongruity of wearing shoes in bed was the first thing that entered his mind. But after he shifted his line of sight towards Eva's head, Ken couldn't help but let out a short scream like Kumasawa. Right in the middle of Eva's forehead, something was set there? Growing there? No. Right in the center of her forehead, an old-fashioned knife, or some weapon like it, was stuck right in! Golden Slaughterer. Hell yes, let's go! Let's go. From the base where it was stuck in, blood dripped down, staining the sheets on the other side bright red. Kumasawa's knees gave way once more, and she sank down on the floor. Her mouth kept flapping open and closed, but she couldn't even scream. Eva, with some kind of weapon sticking out of her forehead, was dead. Characters: Ushiromiya Eva, found on the bed of a guest room inside the mansion, with a weapon resembling an ice pick having been rammed into her forehead. The windows and doors to the room were locked from the inside, and even the chain was set. No way could a human have killed her. Hell yeah, let's go. Both eyes were wide open, and the image of the person who killed her must have been burned into them. But the mouth which wished to speak that truth had already been eternally sealed. Even though that forehead was the last place they wanted to look, they couldn't tear their eyes from it. Right there, the weapon was struck into Eva's forehead, standing almost perfectly upright. And on the handle was a design so complicated you could never expect to see it on an ordinary weapon. That thing could be summed up with the word occult. It was a vulgar object, with a design that might have been of some demon.
Hideyoshi-sama wa... Hideyoshi-sama!
Eva was on top of her bed, but the other bed was empty. Where was Hideyoshi? After taking a backwards glance at Kumasawa, still on her knees and stupefied, he checked the bathroom just in case. At the moment he opened the door, he was greeted by steam and the sound of the shower. The bathroom was of the familiar style as most hotel bathrooms, containing both a bath and a toilet. When taking a shower, a waterproof curtain was used to keep water from flying out. Oh shit. What the fuck? Wait, is the shower head in his head? That waterproof curtain was half open. And lying tumbled down in the bathtub was Hideyoshi, completely naked, both eyes still open. And those eyes were pointing right at Kanon. Just like Eva, a weapon with a demonic design was stuck into his forehead. Since his head had been under the hot water of the shower the whole time, his face wasn't half covered and filthy with blood like Eva's had been. But the sight of him dead while taking a shower was tragic enough. Characters: Ushiromiya Hideyoshi, found in the bathroom of the same guest room that Eva was found in, with a weapon resembling an ice pick having been rammed into his forehead, just the same as Eva. You can't see either of them by looking through the gap of the door while the chain is set. Can't see and can't reach. Go on! Could a human have killed them then? Oh wow. Wait, is Eva's face all bloodied up? Yes! Oh, because he was found in the shower, his face is not as bloodied. Interesting. Just then, Nasuhi's voice rang through the hall. She was probably coming with Genji.
またしてもこのような落書きが。この手紙は中にはなんと。
いえ、まだ読んでおりません。
うかつに触らん方がいいですな。犯人の指紋が残っとるかもしれん。警察に渡した方がいい。
わざわざ手紙を残すくらいです。どうせ指紋など残っていません。
Stating with this finality, Nasuhi picked up the envelope. And before checking its contents, she entered the room herself, where she found Eva, dead.
エヴァさん。
奥様、こちらには秀吉様も。
これはむごいですな。
カノン、シャワーを止めてあげなさい。気の毒にも程があります。
Kanon gripped his handkerchief and twisted the valve, turning off the shower. In the bathtub, a small bottle of body soap had fallen with its cap off. It really looked like he had been attacked right in the middle of taking a shower. A spray of blood still clung slightly to the white bathtub, and the combination of red and white made a horrible contrast.
南條先生。
わかったな。死斑は出とらんが、死後硬直も始まっとらん。おそらく殺されてから1時間経ったかどうかというところだろう。しかしこのような柄の短い凶器で頭蓋骨を考えられん。
Nanjo checked their pulse and their pupils, making certain of their deaths once more. As Kanon watched this business-like treatment, he thought, couldn't you tell at a glance that they're dead without doing all that? Nanjo thought about removing the weapon, but after deciding that where possible it would be better to hand the scene over to the police without disturbing it, he left it alone. However, a close examination of the base revealed that it had no blade. Or rather, it wasn't shaped like a flat blade, but was conical. He noticed that, rather than a knife, it was more like a short-handled spear, something with a shape better suited for thrusting than slicing. Rather than a short spear, some people might call it a thick ice pick. At any rate, the original hideous purpose for which this weapon with this unsettling design was made, and exactly how that purpose was carried out, were both displayed here in such a glaring fashion that there was absolutely no need to use further words to describe it. Nasuhi, hoping to escape this repulsive steam-filling bathroom as soon as she could, covered her mouth with a handkerchief and dashed from the room. Just viewing their gruesome bodies for an instant had been enough to burn the image into her eyes. If she looked any longer, that image would surely remain in her vision for all eternity. The rising urge to vomit was exactly the same feeling she had that morning at the gardening storehouse. For a while, Nasuhi couldn't help but stand with her back facing the guest room, fighting that sickness in her stomach.
とにかくこの部屋を子供たちにジョージ君に見せるわけにはいきません。
I'm gonna adjust the music real quick. I'm sorry everyone, this music's bumping, but I'm gonna have to turn it down a little bit. Alright, how do I get to the next? Yeah. I'm gonna turn the music down by 1 notch so that we can hear the voices better. I'm sorry everyone, I had to do that.
至急この部屋を閉じなさい。見せられませんとも。両親のこんなむごい姿をとてもジョージさんには。
But the recklessly approaching footsteps were obviously George's even before he came flying into the room. George and the other children had been waiting in the parlor. But when they had seen Genji call Nasuhi out, and had noticed her turn pale and fly out of the room, they had felt that he might have been the bearer of bad news. And when they saw a large group of people gathered around the guest room, they were sure of it. George is not gonna have a good time in this game.
なんだよこれ、また魔法陣かよ。
エヴァおばさんたちは無事なんだよな。おいカノン君、これは何の騒ぎなんだ。
バトラ様。
Kanon didn't have to say anything. George's scream after he ran into the room told them everything they needed to know.
誰がこんなことを。殺してやる、殺してやる。
ジョージ君、しっかり。
Nasuhi touched George's shoulder with her hand, but he finally shook her off. George collapsed to the floor beside Eva and buried his face in the bed in front of his mother's face, wailing. Then, he pounded on the bed with his fists over and over again.
ジョージ兄さん、しっかり。バトラ様。
Bowler had his back against the wall of the hallway and was, without restraint, covering his eyes with his right hand and weeping.
心に決めた女を婚約した次の日に失った。同じ日に親父とおふくろまで殺されるなんてよ。そんなのあんまりにもむごいじゃねえか。
Of course, he felt sorry for everyone who had died. But Bowler felt far more sorry for those who had been left alone by the deaths of others. Everyone here now had lost someone close to them. George wasn't the only one he felt sorry for. However, George's pain was far greater than everyone else's.
そりゃよ、人はいつか死ぬぜ。人間誰だっていつか死別の悲しみと戦わなきゃならない日が来るだろうよ。でもよ、そいつは兄貴にとってはずっと未来の話で、しかもそいつは一つずつ順番に訪れるべきもんじゃねえかよ。むごすぎるぜ。やろうやろう。少しは人の情けってもんがねえのかよ。
バトラ、泣かない泣かない。
Maria tried to comfort Bowler in a mechanical sounding voice. Bowler violently wiped his tears.
くそ、 女様に爪を食らってるわけだ。主勢一方ってわけだ。そりゃダメだぜ、全然ダメだ。チェス盤がひっくり返っちまうぜ。野郎は俺たち羊が明日まで逃げる手段もなく怯えてるだけだろうと思ってるだろうよ。だからひっくり返すぜ。明日までこの島から逃げられねえのは野郎も同じだ。しょんべんちびりそうになりながら逃げ隠れするのは俺たちじゃねえ、野郎の方だ。暴いてやるぜ、必ずな。明日までに。いや、明日なんか待たれ。今夜だ。今夜中にその胸ぐらをつかみ上げてやる。
Hell yeah, Valor! Sunday, October 5th, 1986.
この部屋は警察が来るまでこのままにして施錠します。
I don't know what boiler room means.
いいですね。
Nasuhi proclaimed it as though she didn't care whether they agreed or not. If anyone had a right to object, it would have been George. But he looked as though he had shed enough tears. Still facing away from them, George nodded slightly and rose to his feet. Everyone else agreed in response. Nasuhi still hadn't opened the head's Western-style envelope she had picked up. But since they would all be leaving the room now, she decided that she would unseal it in the parlor, where everyone could watch. As soon as they walked out into the hallway to head back to the parlor, some of them immediately felt something out of place, or maybe sensed something strange. Out of darkness.
答えよ。
マリアもわかるか。こりゃ何の匂いだよ。ひでえ匂いだぜ。
Gas? As they all sniffed the air, they did notice a horribly foul burnt smell, unlike any of them had ever smelled before, dripping through the hallway.
私ちょっと厨房を見てきます。火はちゃんと消したはずなんですよ。
After noticing a burnt smell, it was natural that Kumasawa, who had just been cooking in the kitchen, suspected that her own clumsiness has caused it. Kumasawa hastily dashed away.
Kanon, Kumasawaと行きなさい。一人にさせないように。
はい。
After nodding at Genji's order, Kanon went chasing after her. The others, although they did not run, also followed in order to search for the source of the smell.
臭い。
これは確かに鼻が曲がりそうな匂いですね。
It might not be gas. Is it the smell of the fish death?
しかし、換気のために窓を開けてもいいものか。
I can't believe I made that reference. Nasuhi was reluctant to open the windows in a situation where self-defense was so important.
換気扇を回させましょう。窓を開ける必要はないと思います。
ジョージの兄貴、話しかけても大丈夫かよ。
犯人を探す相談なら構わないよ。
It seemed that George had already climbed out of the abyss of his sorrow, and all that filled his chest now was the quiet flame of hatred towards the killer who had stolen the lives of his beloved parents.
部屋にはチェーンがかかってた。さっき構造を見たが、とても外から細工できる代物じゃねえ。つまり、完璧な密室だったってことだ。
そうなるね。バラ庭園の倉庫の時はシャッターの鍵を使用人室からこっそりと持ち出したのだろうとか、あるいは複製の鍵を持っていた可能性とか、いくつか方法が想像できた。でもチェーンは違う。チェーンは一般に浸透した施錠方法の中で最もシンプルに密室を構築できる。
チェーンだけは物理的に破壊しない限り外からはどうにもならないぜ。じゃあつまり犯人は扉からは出入りしなかったってことなのか。
こりゃ面白いや。つい数時間ほど前にも扉以外でどうやって部屋から出入りしたのかってみんなで騒いだ気がするぜ。
Back then, everyone had been making a fuss over how grandfather had disappeared from his room. Because of the receipt that Auntie Eva had stuck in the door on a whim, it was revealed that the door had remained sealed. Also, before I go on, this was the second Twilight, correct? I just thought of this while I was reading. This was the second Twilight, am I correct? Because both of them were gouged in the head. Both of them were just gouged in the head. That's something of the fourth Twilight, not the second Twilight. I mean, the second Twilight could refer to how George and Shannon were torn apart, technically. And on the third Twilight, everyone was talking about Grandpa and how, he could have escaped from his locker room scenario. So we might have jumped right to the fourth Twilight, where gouge the head and kill wasn't in fact. Maybe. Maybe that's the way they're going with this. They went straight to, after, second Twilight, they combined the first and second Twilight into, being similar, with the first Twilight being them discovering the 6 bodies, the second being George grieving over Shannon's death. And then on the third Twilight, they kind of praised Grandpa's noble name through how they were talking about the locker room scenario, to the fourth Twilight where both Hideyoshi and Eva were killed. It never specified that one person had to be killed through that killing method. Meaning, 2 people could be killed at the same time, using the method of the Twilights. Meaning, not everyone could be safe because they were both gouged in the head and killed. That means the rest of them could be killed by gouging the chests and killing them. That's an interesting way to think about it, in my opinion. I'm actually really enjoying the way that I can think of how to interpret the epitaph. Like, I'm really liking the different ways to interpret the epitaph, because I was thinking, this could be the description of tearing the 2 apart, but they were just normally killed through a stab wound in the head. And that matches up with the 4th Twilight, gouge the head and kill. And the epitaph, it never describes how many people had to be killed in each Twilight. So yeah. Because of the receipt that Auntie Eva had stuck in the door on a whim, it was revealed that the door had remained sealed. And since Aunt Nasuhi had been the only person to enter or exit during that time, she had come under suspicion. Auntie Eva had proposed a theory about how Aunt Nasuhi might have thrown Grandfather out the window and left by the door herself. But this door is much simpler. It was sealed from the inside by a door chain. The window had also been closed from the inside, and the bodies had been in the room. This time, it really was, without exaggeration, a true locked room. That's right. If you include grandfather's disappearance, 3 incidents have occurred, and all 3 times, the door has been the point of interest. The shutter door. The first was the shutter. There was a key in the servant room, and if we assume someone knew about that, this can't really be called a locked room. Grandfather's study. The next door... The next was the door sealed by the receipt. However, since Aunt Nasuhi had entered the room, she could have let grandfather out through the window, or throw him out. And she would have been able to lock the window before leaving. Or, like my crazy theory, he could have hidden until the receipt was gone, and left the room later. Basically, this door can be defeated with a handful of desperate tricks. In that sense, you really can't call this one a locked room either. The guest room. And now, we have the door sealed with the door chain. Finally, we have to give up. The window, the door, everything had been locked from the inside. It was a perfect locked room. The first had been a locked room because everyone could be suspected. The second had been a locked room since Aunt Nasuhi could be suspected. But this time, no one could be suspected. This room was a perfect locked room, sealed by a door chain that denied access equally to everyone.
なら、犯人は室内に入らずに犯行に及んだ。部屋の外から何らかの方法で。
You know, this might be weird, but I would say look up at the ceilings. Is that room on the 2nd floor or the 3rd floor? Because if it's on the 2nd floor, you might have to look up at the ceilings. Though it's a crazy theory in general, like someone, going through the ceiling to do the attacks. That's a crazy theory. But it could be plausible.
確かに。チェーンである以上、人が通れるほどは開けなくても、多少の隙間を開けることができる。ノックして顔を覗かせたところを襲うとか。いや、甘いか。
甘いよな。エヴァおばさんの遺体が扉のすぐそばだったならそれも考えたぜ。だがエヴァおばさんは部屋の奥のベッドの上、しかも秀吉おじさんはバスルームだった。チェーンの隙間からでは姿を見ることもできねえし、手を伸ばすこともできねえ。ちくしょう、全然ダメだぜ。さっぱりだ。
Something was tugging softly at my sleeve. It was Maria.
おう。
満足って何がだよ。
Oh boy.
バトラは親族の誰かを疑うのが嫌だから、犯人はベアトリーチェであってほしいと願ったよ。だからベアトリーチェは叶えた。バトラが言った通り、絶対に人間には無理なことをして、バトラに魔女の存在を信じさせてくれた。なのにわがまま。
I tapped Maria, who was laughing unpleasantly, on the head with my fist.
ああ、 叶えてくれてありがとうよ。
Scar in the score.
今のはその礼と、不謹慎な時に笑ったことへの教育的指導だ。それより教えやがれ。エヴァおばさんたちの部屋の扉にも、また怪しげな落書きがされていた。あれもまた魔法陣なのか。
あれは特に覚えやすい特徴的な形なんだから、あのくらい知っててほしいね。
知らねえから花を持たせてやってんだ。ごちゃごちゃ言わねえで解説しろい。
バトラは暴力的だね。あんまり意地悪すると教えないよ。言うよこのげんこつ男。あれは月の1の魔法陣だよ。
何の意味がある？その魔法陣のご利益は？書かれてるヘブライ語の意味は？
記されているのは旧約聖書詩編第107編の16節。主は聖堂の扉を破り、鉄の栓抜きを打ち破ってくださいました。魔法陣の効用は2つ。1つはいかなる方法によって閉ざされた扉でも開くことができる。
そりゃ便利な魔法だぜ。つまり魔法の力に頼らなきゃ開けぬ密室の扉っていう魔女様のアピールってわけか。もう一つの効用は、
開かぬ扉を八方塞がりの事態に見立て扉を開く。難解な事態の時に用いることで、それまで思いつきもしなかった解決策を与えてくれるんだよ。平たく言うと、観察力や洞察力、ひらめきや直感を授けてくれるんだね。ベアトリーチェはバトラごとき人間風情に、この扉の開き方がわかるものかって挑発してるんだよ。
よーし、もう黙れご苦労。上等だぜ。その魔女の挑戦受けてやら。
マリアちゃん、この世に魔女も悪魔も存在しない。父さんと母さんは誰かが殺した。それが僕のよく知る人間なのか知らない人間なのかはわからない。でもそのどちらであっても必ず人間なんだ。
しかしどうやって？せいぜい10センチ程度しか開かない扉の隙間からどうやったら室内の2人を？
それにしても耐え難い匂いです。一体何事なのですか
？Kanon Kumasawa, who had gone ahead, realized before they even reached the kitchen that the smell wasn't coming from there. That was because, on their way to the kitchen, they noticed that an even thicker wave of stench was rising up from the stairs leading to the basement.
ボイラー室。またボイラーの調子が悪いんでしょうか。
Those stairs led to the underground boiler room. The mansion's boiler was old, and had been playing up recently. Both of them had witnessed problems with the boiler on several occasions, but they had never smelled it belching out a stench like this before. Slammed.
今の音は
Closed my heart. Whoa! Kanon has an expression! The sound that they had heard from the basement had definitely been the sound of a door closing. Although she did phrase it as a question, Kumasawa too had already realized that the sound couldn't have been anything else. Kumasawa was so surprised at that sound that her knees gave way yet again, and she cowered. Because, at that very moment, no one could have been in the boiling room. Because, at that moment, Because, at that very moment, no one could have been in the boiler room. Just a few seconds ago, everyone had been crowded together in Eva and Hideyoshi's room. So, who caused the sound of a door closing just now?
Kanon-san!
Instantly gathering the situation, Kanon ran down towards the basement. Since they had heard the door of a... Oh my god. 1 second, let me take a breather. Oh my gosh, I am so sorry. Since they had heard the sound of a door closing just now, and there was no trace of someone climbing the stairs, it meant that the person who had closed the door was now inside the boiler room. If the boiler room had been a dead end, Kanon wouldn't have rushed in so hastily. But Kanon was a servant, so he knew. There were 2 entrances, one that opened to the mansion, and one that opened to the courtyard. If he didn't chase them now, they might slip away. Kumasawa reached the same conclusion long after Kanon did. But she couldn't let him go alone. If the thing in the boiler room was the killer, an opponent who had easily killed 6 adults in the first murder, then Kanon would be no match if he simply confronted them alone. Of course, by this argument, Kumasawa joining him alone wouldn't mean anything but... At any rate, after a delay, Kumasawa decided that she mustn't let Kanon go alone, and she dashed down the stairs. At that time, Kanon was already in the boiler room. The boiler room's characteristic damp heat tormented him. It had always been an unpleasantly smelly and hot place. And on top of that, the room was full of that horrible stench, which made Kanon feel like he was going to be sick. There was no doubt that this room was the origin. In that case, Kanon should have been searching for where the smell was coming from. However, Kanon kept gazing straight forward as he grabbed a hatchet from a tool shelf just off to the side of the door. He had stretched out his hand because he wanted a hatchet. He had wanted to grab a weapon. Any weapon. Why? Kanon gazed into the darkness where the naked light bulb couldn't pierce. Then, he answered.
ルーレットは数字と赤黒にかけて配当を競い合う。だが赤か黒かのようなリスクの低い賭けはその程度の配当しか与えられない。
The words coming from Kanon's mouth were swallowed up by the darkness. That darkness suddenly started to swirl, glittering. It's gonna be butterflies, isn't it? Knew it! Fucking butterflies. Maybe there might be a witch. Or this is just a hallucination. Whoa. It was a very fantastical scene. Golden sparkling butterflies that hid in the shadows all around the boiler room flapped their wings, twinkling beautifully, and disappeared into the darkness, gathering together. Kanon continued speaking, directing his words at the darkness as it swallowed the butterflies up. But, as the butterflies gathered in the darkness, They... Probably, no. They must have laughed. But Kanon continued to speak without faltering in the slightest.
逆に、より的中率の低いかけ方をすれば、そのリスクに比例した配当が与えられる。親方様は、天文学的なリスクを的中できることを奇跡と呼び、その結果得られる天文学的な配当を魔法と呼んでいた。親方様とお前がどんな魔法を求めてルーレットに挑んでいるのか、そんなことには興味ない。しかしルーレットには赤でも黒でもない目が出うることを忘れている。
Roulette has a special pocket called Zero, which means that the house takes everything in certain variants of the game. Meaning that all of the coins bet on the table will be swept up, just as though everyone has forfeit.
僕は一つだけ心に決めていた。もしシャノンが殺されて僕が生き残るようなことがあったなら、この身を投げ出してお前のルーレットを全て台無しにしてやろうと。
Oh shit.
これは親方様が決めたルールでも、ましてやお前が決めたルールでもない。このルールは僕が作った。僕はもう家具じゃない。お前のルーレットのゼロなんだ。
Oh, come on, Kanon. Come on, Kanon. I know you're probably going to be fucked since this is episode 1 of 8, but I'm really rooting you on. Kanon's face twisted with humiliation. It was clear that he had been dealt ridicule in response to his self-denial. Kanon's brow creased even further, and a fierce expression that he had never shown anyone appeared on his face. The hand grasping the hatchet was shaking. His sweat became drops which slid down. It was clear that the emotion causing Kanon's hand to shake was not anger alone. However, Kanon suppressed that emotion.
僕はもうお前の言葉に惑わされたりはしない。悪魔のルーレットはこれでおしまいだ。地獄にてさらに1000年、次の召喚者を待つがいい。ベアドリーチェ！
When Kanon swung the hatchet upwards and tried to dive into the darkness definitely sneered. It sneered at that courage as vulgar, lazy, futile, and meaningless. Whoa! What just happened? Kanon, his hatchet still held aloft, couldn't take another step after that. Oh, yep, knew it, he was fucked. Damn it. With a clang, the hatchet that Kanon had been grasping fell and rolled on the floor. And following that, with a pair of thuds, Kanon's knees hit left and right. That hand, which looks like it was trying to catch the sky now that the hatchet had been dropped, gradually lowered and rested on his chest. There's a gouge on his chest. Then, the other hand did the same. Yep, he got gouged in the chest. Fifth Twilight. Right there was a handle with a demon-shaped design engraved on it. The same type of weapon that had been stabbed into Eva and Hideyoshi's foreheads was in Kanon's chest. Requiem. Fresh blood dribbled from the corner of Kanon's mouth as it twisted in anguish. It was makeup too powerful for Kanon's white skin. Man. Around the scene, the glittering gold butterflies danced mesmerizingly through the darkness. It was a beautiful, beautiful dance. A funeral march of tribute, ridicule, and contempt for a single boy's self-sacrifice. Oh my god, I'm crying! Kanon had already been prepared for his own death. But he attempted one last measure of resistance to reject death in at least the form it had been delivered to him. With both hands, he grasped the handle of the weapon sticking into his chest. And gritting his teeth at the acute, unearthly pain, he pulled it out. For only a moment, a bright red spray gushed out. It made an unpleasant bloop sound. It probably resembled the sound of Kanon's soul as it was sucked into the swamp of the dead. Oh, fuck. Don't kill Kumasawa! Oh god. Kumasawa screamed at the incomprehensible sight in front of her. Kanon was lying in a pool of blood. Kumasawa's heart was a complete mess. Ah! What a terrible fate! He would have been killed if I had been with him! Ah! What incredible fortune! If I had been with him, I might have been killed too! As she screamed, her expression was filled with complete confusion, and all of the muscles of her face were pulled up, almost as though she was smiling while crying. No one could have made fun of an expression such as this. The first one to dash in was Nasuhi, with rifle at the ready. Battler and Genji dashed in after her. Normally, they probably would have started discussing the origin of that violent stench filling the boiler room. But after they saw Kanon, who was lying on the ground as if he were drowning in an ocean of his own blood, the stench wasn't important anymore. Nasuhi realized that even though Kanon was on the verge of death, he was still conscious, so she sent Genji to get the doctor. Nasuhi, holding the rifle aloft, faced the darkness in the center of the boiler room and shouted, Battler, thinking quickly, took a large flashlight from the tool shelf alongside the door, and used its light to cut through the darkness Nasuhi was glaring into. But the light only shone on mechanical-looking piping at the door. The door had been opened with a small crack, and it was obvious that someone had left through there in a hurry.
夏日おばさん、あの扉はどこへ？
源氏、あの扉はどこに通じているのですか？
You don't know?
中庭です。
逃がすかよ、クソこの野郎
Balor let out a war cry as he slammed into the door. Cool air from outside suddenly rushed in. There were some thin, rough stairs leading up. Balor ran up them, shouting.
待ちなさい、バトラ君。一人では危険です。
Natsuhi also rushed up the stairs, chasing after Balor. At the top was the courtyard. The courtyard of the mansion had been built strictly for lighting purposes, so it wasn't a very elegant place. Because it was surrounded on all sides, the air was calm and completely undisturbed, even though they could hear the sound of strong winds. There was only the gentle, sorrowful rain. Through the cold, scattered raindrops, Balor dashed up the stairs and into the courtyard, where he looked in every direction. Of course, the odds of him finding a suspicious silhouette just standing around nonchalantly were pretty much zero. Balor turned around, looking in all directions. He turned again and again. He kept spinning until he almost lost his sense of direction. He prayed that he would see the culprit somewhere in the scenery. But there was no chance. All he saw as he spun was more and more of the mansion's heartless walls and windows. Furthermore, there were two entrances into the mansion from the courtyard, and neither of them were locked. Because the courtyard couldn't be entered from outside the mansion, the doors had been built without locks. He couldn't tell which one they had left through. He had to get up. Balor pounded on the wall with his fists, swearing.
バトラ君、一人で先走ってはダメです。バトラ君。
Balor put his head against the wall and scratched at it with his fingernails as he cried.
畜生エヴァおばさんに秀吉おじさん、さらにカノン君かよ。6人も殺しやがった。飽き足らずさらに3人も殺しやがった。ふざけるな。エヴァおばさんも秀吉おじさんも昔からいつも優しくしてくれる愉快なおばさんたちだったじゃねえかよ。カノン君とは昨日会ったばかりだが、きっとこれから仲良くなれたと思うぜ。なんで殺したんだ。どうして人ってのはな、殺しちまったらな、二度と生き返らねえんだぞ。
People die when they are killed.
タケノコみてえにひょいひょい生えてきちゃ来ねえんだぞ。どうして殺すんだよ。どうして
Balor was a boy who could understand the feelings of pain and regret in a person's heart. So he cried, with all of his strength. Natsuhi, who had always thought of Balor as a strong person, was a little surprised to find that he had this delicate side. And at the same time, understood how easily hurt the heart of a young person could be, so she held him.
大丈夫です。あなたもジョージ君も マリアちゃんもジェシカも私は母として
Shit.
そして後宮家の代表として
I'm sorry, Suhi. I'm sorry, Suhi. This warrants a slap. Oh! Ah! Battler, after sobbing into Nasuhi's chest for a while, wiped his tears with a bitter smile, and tried to convey that he had cried more than enough already, just as he had done the times before.
とにかく一度下に戻りましょう。犯人を探すより自分たちの身を守る方が最優先です。明日になれば船が来る。
If we survive to the boat.
そうすれば警察がやってきて全てを白日のもとにさらし出してくれるでしょう。犯人がどうあがこうともこの島から逃げられるものですか。
そうっすね。警察さえ来れば。
Umineko no I'm sorry, I'm gonna say it the correct way. When the seagulls cry, Umineko no Nakukori ni, the crime will be solved. But, for some reason, Battler felt a sense of uneasiness, as if the seagulls would never cry again. That couldn't be true. When the typhoon passes, the lively seagulls should return to the harbor again. I returned to the boiler room, along with Aunt Nasuhi, and told the room weakly that we hadn't found anything. They told me that Dr. Nanjo and Georgianiki had carried Kanekun to the servant room. The servant room had a first aid kit and a sink, and could apparently function as a nurse's office. Kumasawa-san and Jessica had accompanied them. Stains from Kanekun's blood remained on the floor. Judging by the large amount of blood lost and the ruthless shape of the weapon that had fallen unceremoniously to the ground, I figured that Dr. Nanjo's treatment would probably end in vain. That weapon was doubtlessly the same type that had been stuck in Auntie Eva and Uncle Hideyoshi's foreheads. Oh, wait. Isn't the demonic design on the handle a little different? There seem to be some small differences in that part. Still, as far as their overall shape was concerned, the weapons were all of the same type. Though it had seemed brutal, we'd left the weapons stuck into Auntie Eva and Uncle Hideyoshi to preserve the crime. Okay, nothing has changed about his profile just yet. Nothing has changed just yet. I just wanted to check. So, this was the first time I was able to have a perfect view of the entire weapon. Indeed, the weapon was not bladed like a knife, but shaped like an ice pick. Or rather, a thin steak. And also, it had a spiral-shaped design, sort of like a drill? To use a disturbing analogy, it looks like something that might be driven into the hearts of human sacrifices in some demonic ritual. Including the handle, it was about 25 centimeters long. Half of that was the steak-shaped part, which was stained with deep red blood. The length of the blood-stained part made it clear just how deeply it must have penetrated into Kaneko-kun's chest. But Aunt Nasuhi and the rest were not even looking at the weapon. Instead, standing in front of the incinerator, where the horrible stench was emanating from, they had probably pulled that out of the furnace, where it must have been burning. It was still smoldering and kept sending out dense waves of that awfully unpleasant smell. Genji-san and Maria were staring down at it. Aunt Nasuhi probably couldn't stand to look directly at it. She kept shaking her head, her back to it. I thought that after everything that's happened, nothing could surprise me anymore, but this was... I stood there for a while, moaning, with a rising urge to vomit. The true nature of that unearthly stench was the charred smell from within the incinerator of a burning corpse. Grandpa? The clothes, the surface of the body, and the hair were all hideously burned. That grotesque corpse was in a state where not the face, nor the age, nor even the gender could be guessed at. But when I thought about it calmly, I realized that a corpse appearing at this time could only be one person. Grandfather, who had disappeared that morning, and whose whereabouts had been unknown.
おそらく親方様だと思います。
私も同感です。このようなお姿でお亡くなりになるとは。おいたわしや。
So wait, who's next in line now? I'm sorry, I'm thinking this more of a thought, but is George? Is George the head of the family now? Hey, congrats, George! You're promoted!
でもこの死体本当にじい様だって保証はあるんすか？こうも黒焦げじゃ性別さえも想像つかないってのに。
バトラ君、足をご覧なさい。
Aunt Nasuhi, with her handkerchief over her mouth and her eyes averted, pointed and told me to look at the burnt corpse's feet. Hmm?
両足の指です。よくご覧になってください。
本当だ。
Oh. I thought that was the sound of his character sheet changing. Just as Genji-san had said, there were 6 toes on each foot. Each of the toes had been arranged so normally that I hadn't noticed.
親方様はお生まれの時から両足の指に特徴がございました。そして故に親方様は後宮家の再興を託されたのです。
後宮家には昔から生まれつき多子症の方が多かったそうです。多分遺伝的なものでしょう。
Polydactyly literally means many fingers. Because of a little mistake by God when the person is born, one of their toes or fingers splits into 2, and the total number increases. There's a scientific explanation, but I can't remember from the top of my head, but it's very interesting. It has to do with something with genetics and genes. But a big deal isn't usually made of polydactyly in the world at large. That's because it isn't a disease, but something people are born with. So the hospital is already aware of it when they are still babies, and about the time they turn 1 year old, they are given surgery to make them normal. So, even if a child has polydactyly, it is treated before they become self-aware, so they might not even remember it themselves. Incidentally, it seems that it can occur with a probability of about 1 in every 2,000 babies. So even though it's not usually seen, it isn't that rare at all. Speaking of which, I think Uncle Hideyoshi mentioned something to me long ago. Something about how even Toyotomi Hideyoshi, the man who unified Japan at the end of the Shingoku period, possessed 6 fingers on one hand. According to Aunt Nasuhi, among the many Ushiromiya family heads, the ones praised most for their wisdom had all possessed polydactyly. Because of that, when grandfather was born, his relatives were all excited at the thought that he might become another wise leader. And when the leading relatives all died in the Great Kanto earthquake, it was apparently argued that if anyone could restore the family from that, it would be grandfather, because of the auspicious sign of his birth. If grandfather thought being the head was not a bad gig, the 6th toe must have been pretty lucky for him. Come to think of it, I think I've heard about some country where it's believed that people with polydactyly should be treated as gods and revered. This is beside the point, but it's fairly common in mystery novels for a corpse to be burned to hide whose body it is. But it looks like in grandfather's case, just being toasted was enough to hide the proof of his identity. And grandfather's body was not simply burnt. That's the drip noise of grandfather. Grandfather's character scene, holy shit. Burned in the incinerator, with a weapon resembling an ice pick having been rammed into his forehead. The old midget's wish shattered, ungranted. But, this is but one possible result of the gamble he always knew was not in his favor. An ice pick being rammed into his forehead? Wait. Is he the 4th Twilight then? But wait, whatever happened to the 3rd Twilight? Uncle Hideyoshi and Aunt Eva, they died on the 2nd Twilight, and that's the only thing that makes sense. They were, you know, the two who are close, they're tearing apart, so... Yeah, Uncle Hideyoshi and Eva were in the 2nd Twilight, and the 4th Twilight was Grandpa. But, what the fuck happened in the 3rd Twilight? They never praised Kinzo in between the time of, you know, deaths. They never did praise his noble name. Interesting, because if he's the 4th Twilight, and Kanon's the 5th, okay. Just like Auntie Eva and Uncle Hideyoshi, and Kanon-kun too, who had been stabbed in the chest. He had one of those demon's ice picks stuck into his forehead.
指に当主の指輪がありません。
昨夜の手紙の通りということですか。お父様、さぞやご無念でしょう。
Aunt Nasuhi let her head droop and closed her eyes tightly. This room had also become a vital crime scene for us to hand over to the police. It was decided that we would leave grandfather's corpse here and lock the room, sealing it. It wasn't clear when grandfather's corpse started burning in the incinerator, since, according to Genji-san, the flames hadn't been that strong. The body must have started burning a long time ago. And that stench must have slowly crept out of the furnace and filled the room bit by bit, eventually pouring out and climbing up the staircase. A long time ago. A long time ago. Nasuhi, did you really see Kinzo? Or Are you hiding something? Did you really see Kenzo? Or are you not hiding something and someone's trying to, get the blame pinned on you? Putting aside whether he was rare, well done. Grandfather had been brought out, killed, and burned, even though he had started out in the locked room created by his auto lock. There's probably no doubting this. However, according to Genji-san, the boiler room is usually locked. The probability that someone outside our group was lurking around committing the crimes was now overwhelmingly high. And there was also a good chance that this person was walking around with something like a master key. After all, the doors and windows throughout the mansion had been checked. But despite that, the culprit was freely strolling around the mansion. Mind. After this latest crime, can we now be sure that a 19th person exists? They haven't shown themselves once, and yet, they're trying to tout their existence. Along with Kirie-san's chessboard theory, I've been using this contradiction to deny the existence of a 19th person. By flipping over the chessboard once more, the very fact that this crime makes it perfectly obvious that a 19th person exists means that the existence of the 19th person is even less possible. As long as that 19th person doesn't show themselves in front of us. If the culprit could get grandfather out through the door sealed by the receipt, if they could kill Auntie Eva and Uncle Hideyoshi from the other side of the door sealed by a chain, then is it possible for them to create a fictional 19th person through these strange tricks and devices? If we still want to believe that the culprit is among us, then the list of suspects is very short. The four of us kids, and Suhi, Genji-san, Kumasawa-bachan, and Dr. Nanjo. One of these people has to be the culprit! Wait, we can't be sure of that. Just a second ago, we started doubting whether the body here was actually grandfather's, right? Maybe we should try thinking of the other bodies in the same way. For example, the first 6 had their faces horribly destroyed. Some of the bodies had kept enough of their faces for us to confirm who they were, but my old bastard, for example, had lost his entire face, as though it had been peeled off. We'd only figured out which body was which by their clothes and surroundings. Had the culprit prepared a fake corpse beforehand and disguised it to make it look like they've died, then hid somewhere and continued their killing spree? Sounds ridiculous, but that doesn't mean it's an impossible trick. It's too early to give in to this 19th person. No, this witch.
マリアちゃん、それ以上しげしげと見てはなりません。さあ、バトラ君も。カノンの容体も気になりますし、いつまでもこのようなところにはいられません。戻りましょう。
Maria hadn't gone out with everyone else, but had remained in the boiler room. The thing she was staring physically at was probably not grandfather's body, but the demon's ice pick that was sticking out of his forehead. No doubt an irresistible item for the obsessed. I wrapped her on the forehead.
おい、マリア。ベアトリーチェの目的は何なんだ？俺たち全員の命か。
Wish and gold. Symbolo.
ベアトリーチェはもうすぐ蘇るんだよ。その時、誰も生き残れはしない。
That was perfect timing for the music.
笑えるもんだぜ。自分だけ蚊帳の外だと思ってるのか？ どうして自分の身に危機が迫っていると感じない？どうして怯えない？
ベアトリーチェは約束してくれたもん。私は黄金鏡へ連れて行ってもらえるんだよ。そこはね、しがらみも何もない全ての人たちがずっと一緒にいつまでも優しくし合っていける素敵な場所なんだよ。
Is this me, or... Does this sound like the most obvious fucking trap ever? Maria! You probably just fell for the most obvious trap in the existence of traps! Maria.
私は楽しみだよ。その時はもうすぐだもん。
Seriously, that's an obvious demon's trap. Maybe that's just me saying that. Just what kind of person is Maria? I only know what Maria was like 6 years ago, when she was 3. She had been pure and obedient, a good kid. This new Maria 6 years later, and the Maria I knew, didn't seem to fit together. Just who is she? This witch who calls herself Maria. To her, with her obstinate belief in witches, this series of unsolvable crimes is proof that witches actually exist. Every time something occurs that would be difficult for a human, it becomes a little harder for the rest of us to not believe in that witch called Beatrice. It must be an intense pleasure for Maria to see her relatives, who once firmly denied the witch's existence, start acknowledging her existence one by one. Is that why she's in high spirits?
マリア、もう一遍だけ聞く。どうせ答えは同じだろうが、もう一遍だけ聞く。お前は昨日バラ庭園で手紙をもらった。そいつは誰なんだ？
ほう、だからベアトリーチェ。バトラがまだ信じない。ほう。
Maria only repeated what she had already said. Maria had met with the 19th person, the witch. Had that really been a 19th person, or had that been one of the 18 who told her to say otherwise? All that's certain is that Maria has been with the rest of us constantly, has always had an alibi, and hasn't done anything that would put her under suspicion. She's simply overjoyed at being made Beatrice's messenger, and certainly is not our 19th person. I think. That's right. I wonder what's written in the letter we picked up in Auntie Eva and Uncle Hideyoshi's room. Aunt Nasuhi should still have it with her. Let's go to class break. Damn it! I'm gonna have to wait till next time to see this letter. Umineko no Nakukori ni... Why is the clock up closer? Oh, come on! We end this episode with... No! No! Fuck! Kanon, with a weapon resembling an ice pick, having been rammed into his chest, he was found in the boiler room. How presumptuous for furniture. Damn it. I'm legitimately upset about Kanon's death. I am legitimately upset. Oh, man. Well, it's time to read the letter and epitaph before I end this episode, get in my shower, and fucking cry. Welcome to Rokenjima, ladies and gentlemen of the Ushiromiya family. I am Beatrice, the alchemist for this family, under the employ of Kenzo-sama. I've served him for many years in accordance with our contract, but today, Kenzo-sama has announced the termination of that contract. Therefore, I ask that you acknowledge my resignation from the position of family alchemist as of today. And now, there is one part of the contract that I must explain to you all. I, Beatrice, lent Kenzo-sama a vast quantity of gold under certain terms. One of these terms specifies that all the gold is to be returned to me upon the termination of the contract. Furthermore, I am to receive everything of the Ushiromiya family as interest. After hearing this, you may feel as though Kenzo-sama has been savagely ruthless. However, Kenzo-sama did append a special clause in the contract so that you would have a chance to preserve your wealth and honor, if, and only if, that special clause is fulfilled. I will lose my rights to the gold and the interest for all eternity. Special clause. Beatrice has the right to I got a notification on my phone that I saw from the corner of my eye that distracted me, I'm sorry. Special clause. Beatrice has the right to collect the gold and accumulated interest upon the termination of the contract. However, if someone is able to discover the hidden gold of this contract, Beatrice must abandon these rights for all time. The collection of the interest will proceed shortly, but if any one of you fulfills the terms of this special clause, I shall return everything, including the portion that has already been collected. Furthermore, as the first step in this collection of Kenzo-sama's debt, I have taken possession of the Ushiromiya family head's ring, which signifies the passage of the Ushiromiya family headship from one individual to another. I ask that you confirm this for yourselves by examining the imprint on the wax seal. Kenzo-sama has already publicly displayed the location of the hidden gold within the epitaph under my portrait. The rules apply equally to all who can read the epitaph. If you discover the gold, I shall return everything to you. Tonight, I ask that you enjoy your battle of wits with Kenzo-sama to the fullest. I sincerely pray that this night will both be intellectual and elegant. Beatrice the Golden. Now it's time for the epitaph. Behold the Sweetfish River, running through my beloved home of old. You who seek the Golden Land, follow its path down the stream in search of the key. There, damn it, I missed the line. As you travel down it, you will see the village. In that village, look for the shore that you speak of. There, the key to the Golden Land sleeps. You who laid hand upon the key must journey as follows to the Golden Land. On the first twilight, sacrifice the 6 chosen by the key. On the second twilight, those who remain shall tear apart the 2 who are close. On the third twilight, those who remain shall praise my noble name. On the fourth twilight, gouge the head and kill. On the fifth twilight, gouge the chest and kill. On the sixth twilight, gouge the stomach and kill. On the seventh twilight, gouge the knee and kill. On the eighth twilight, gouge the leg and kill. On the ninth twilight, the wish revives, and none shall be left alive. On the 10th twilight, the journey ends, and you shall reach the home of the gold. The witch shall praise the wise, and bestow 4 treasures. 1 shall be all the Golden Land's gold. 2 resurrects all the dead people's souls. 1 even revives all the love they possessed. And 1 for the witch to eternally rest. Rest in peace, my beloved witch, Beatrice. And with that, I shall end this video. Thank you everybody for watching this video. Leave a like, leave a comment, and I'll be back with some more Umineko no Nakukori ni next time. Leave a like, leave a comment, and I'll be back with more Umineko no Nakukori ni next time. Okay. should probably turn off the camera.
Okay.